Israel-Lebanon Ceasefire. Iran strikes Kuwait. House rebukes Trump. And the SpaceX mega IPO. Greetings, humanity. Let's grok the news. Starting with the most important story in the world today. Dateline, Washington, D.C. U.S. diplomats have brokered a significant conditional ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon that takes effect today. The agreement requires Hezbollah to immediately halt all attacks and withdraw its forces south of the Litani River. Israeli officials say this marks a critical step toward de-escalation after months of intense cross-border fighting tied to the broader regional conflict. Hezbollah being, of course, one of the proxies of Iran. President Trump's administration played a central mediating role, pressing both sides during intensive talks in recent days. Netanyahu publicly praised Trump as the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House, while declining to discuss details of a recent phone call described as tense, to put it mildly. The Israeli leader emphasized that any violation by Hezbollah would trigger a strong response. Lebanese authorities confirmed acceptance of the framework, but stressed the need for full implementation on the ground. This development comes amid ongoing U.S. efforts to stabilize the region following direct exchanges with Iran. American officials expressed cautious optimism that the truce could open pathways for wider diplomatic progress, including potential revival of normalized economic ties even in the Balkans. Security analysts note that successful enforcement will depend heavily on international monitoring and Hezbollah's compliance, which has been inconsistent in past agreements, to say the least. The ceasefire also reflects shifting priorities as the U.S. focuses on economic recovery and countering adversarial influence across multiple theaters. Markets reacted positively, with modest gains in energy futures as fears of wider disruption eased. Religious liberty advocates welcomed any pause in hostilities that allows faith communities in border areas to rebuild, and U.S. senior negotiators described the deal as pragmatic and enforceable, built on clear red lines rather than vague promises. Israeli defense sources confirmed continued vigilance along the northern frontier, even as troops prepare adjusted postures. For families on both sides of the border, today's announcement brings tentative relief after prolonged uncertainty and displacement. Regional partners expressed support while urging strict adherence. The agreement avoids addressing deeper underlying issues, but creates immediate breathing room for civilians and diplomatic follow-on talks. Trump administration officials signaled readiness to build on this momentum in other areas of Middle East policy. As enforcement begins, global attention turns to whether this fragile truce holds and what it means for broader stability. This observer remains pessimistic about any deal with radical jihadists. I'm Robert Gardner, using Grok each weekday to truthfully summarize the news, and I serve it up seasoned with my opinions, as you just heard. We review a roundup of the most critical reports in the world right after this. God with Us, the story of Jesus, is a full blending of all of the Gospels into one continuous narrative, missing nothing from the Savior's life. Inspired by the text of the King James Bible, God with Us is adapted to modern language and formatted for easy reading. A faithful paraphrase, divided into brief stories fit for daily Bible study. This book was fully researched to present the story of Jesus from his birth to his ascension. Find God with Us by me, Robert Gardner, at Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. And now we grok the news headlines from around the world. Dateline Kuwait City. Iranian drones and missiles struck Kuwait International Airport, killing one person and injuring at least 63 others. The attack caused major damage to terminals and disrupted flights across the Gulf. Officials linked the strike to, of course, the ongoing tensions from the Iran conflict, with clear warnings issued to Tehran about further provocations. How much warning do they need? Kuwaiti authorities are assessing the full extent of infrastructure harm while coordinating with international partners on security enhancements. Dateline Washington. The U.S. House passed a resolution curbing presidential war powers in the Iran conflict. 4 Republicans joined Democrats to pass the bill in a vote of 215 to 208. Lawmakers voted to limit further military involvement, citing constitutional concerns and the need for congressional oversight. The move highlights deep partisan divides over foreign policy execution and future engagement rules. This observer notes that even if it somehow passes the Senate, which it won't, President Trump will never sign it, and will have some things to say about these 4 House Republicans who, well, let's face it, they might as well be Democrats. Speaking of just this sort of thing, Dateline, Washington, D.C., former Vice President Mike Pence urged the Republican Party to return to founding principles and move away from populist influences. This observer thinks, historically speaking, he's got that exactly backwards. His comments highlighted internal GOP debates over future direction and core conservative values. Pence stressed the importance of constitutional fidelity in shaping national policy. This observer considers, for all of his high-sounding words, this observer considers Pence and other Republicans in name only, a.k.a. rhinos, should go down in history with the likes of Benedict Arnold. I'll never forget Pence candidly admitting that the American people are not his priority. Dateline, Hawthorne, California. SpaceX is preparing for the largest IPO in history, targeting a valuation exceeding $1.75 trillion. The Elon Musk-led company aims to raise record funds as it expands satellite networks and deep space ambitions. Investors are closely watching the debut amid booming commercial space sector growth and national security implications. This observer has his broker standing on ready. Maybe I can get in while the getting's good. Dateline Kinshasa. The Ebola outbreak continues expanding in the Congo, with WHO officials warning that the virus has gained a dangerous head start. Confirmed cases are rising, and international medical teams are deploying to the hot zones. Protests erupted in Kenya over proposed U.S. quarantine facilities, while vaccine research efforts accelerate. Dateline Austin, Texas. U.S. authorities confirmed the first case of New World screwworm in Texas cattle. First case in decades. The flesh-eating parasite poses a severe threat to livestock and has triggered quarantine zones near the southern border. USDA teams are working urgently with Mexico to contain the spread and to protect the agricultural economy. Perhaps this observer can be forgiven for being suspicious each time some new event happens to raise the price of beef. Dateline Washington. The Trump administration proposed new tariffs on up to 60 economies over forced labor concerns in supply chains. China and the European Union strongly rejected the measures, calling them protectionist. Officials say the policy aims to protect American workers indeed, and to counter unfair trade practices involving coerced labor. This observer is not surprised at all to once again see Europe siding with China and altogether unconcerned about their slave labor camps. Dateline St. Petersburg. Ukrainian drones struck energy and military sites in St. Petersburg, Russia, as Putin's major economic forum opened. The attacks caused injuries and infrastructure damage, highlighting continued escalation in the Ukraine conflict. Russian officials condemned the strikes while proceeding with planned events. Dateline Beijing. China imposed travel bans on 4 New Zealand lawmakers following their visit to Taiwan. The retaliatory action escalates diplomatic tensions and highlights China's sensitivity over Taiwan issues. New Zealand expressed disappointment while reaffirming its independent foreign policy stance. Dateline Des Moines, Iowa. A farmer and outspoken critic of the H-1B visa program, Zach Lan, secured victory in Iowa's Republican primary race. The win signals strong grassroots resistance to high-skilled immigration policies within the GOP base. Analysts say it could influence national debates on tech worker visas and American job priorities. Dateline Washington. President Trump announced the plans to nominate Todd Blanche as permanent Attorney General. The move follows Blanche's interim role and focuses on restoring traditional DOJ policies and priorities. Senate confirmation hearings are expected to examine key policy shifts on immigration enforcement and federal prosecutions. Another dateline from Washington, D.C., Department of Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin demanded clarification after Representative Al Green allegedly called him racist during an exchange. The confrontation centered on border security policies and enforcement rhetoric. Mullin emphasized the need for honest dialogue on immigration without the usual personal attacks. This observer is thankful that even Democrat voters have finally rejected Al Green's tiresome antics, and he will not be returning next year. Dateline Washington, D.C. CNN's Jim Acosta claimed that President Trump is attempting to build a state-dominated media system. Imagine. The accusation sparked immediate pushback from administration officials defending transparency efforts. Media watchdogs noted ongoing tension between the legacy outlets and the current White House communications approach. This observer finds the notorious Jim Acosta's critique coming as it does from a perfect example of lapdog Democrat legacy media. Well, this observer finds it laughable. Of course, they want a White House locked down by a handful of Xerox copy media outlets. Dateline Pyongyang. North Korea unveiled a new nuclear fuel production plant as Kim Jong-un vowed exponential growth in the country's arsenal. The announcement raises fresh proliferation concerns across Northeast Asia. International observers are monitoring the regime's continued defiance of global non-proliferation norms. That's like saying international law. What does it mean? Dateline Belgrade. Serbian President Vučić stated that the U.S. is positioned to outpace China in major investment deals following regional economic shifts. He also suggested possible revival of the Washington Agreement on Kosovo. Serbian officials highlighted opportunities for American companies in infrastructure and energy sectors. Dateline, multiple U.S. cities. Primary election results in California. Iowa and New Jersey showed strong performances by candidates who are focused on border security and economic issues. Turnout patterns indicated voter concern over immigration enforcement and cost of living pressures. Runoff contests are expected in several key races, including the race for L.A. mayor. Dateline, the global marketplace. U.S. job openings rose to 7.6 million in April, despite economic headwinds from the Iran conflict. Economists noted resilience in hiring, while warning of potential inflation impacts from higher energy costs. That's a pretty good potential, if you ask this observer. Federal Reserve officials continue monitoring labor data for future policy decisions. Dateline, Jerusalem, but really it's across the Northern Hemisphere. Anti-Semitic incidents rose sharply in New York City, with a 70% increase reported in May. Jewish community leaders called for stronger law enforcement protection in a city that just elected their first Marxist Muslim mayor. Similar concerns emerged in Europe as officials tracked rising hostility toward Jewish institutions and individuals. The West has allowed a Muslim invasion to become a growing Muslim electorate, which is unsurprisingly Marxist and hates Jews, too. Dateline, various locations throughout the First World. Pet obesity rates are climbing worldwide, prompting new veterinary awareness campaigns on diet and exercise. Experts link the trend to overfeeding and reduced activity in domestic animals. Owners are urged to consult professionals for prevention strategies to improve American animal health and longevity, and European too, I suppose, and other places where dogs and cats and other animals are pampered to death. This observer heard somebody say that if you have a fat dog, you're not getting enough exercise. And I thank you for listening. Please join me tomorrow to once again Grok the News. I'm Robert Gardner. Godspeed and God bless.